welcome everybody to the Community Economic Development Committee, April 21st, 2022. Mandy, will you do the roll?
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Allard? Ms. Kennedy? Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Rivera? Chair, there's not currently a quorum, but you can still continue with the meeting. There just can't be any action taken.
Okay, and Felix, Jamie, and Crystal are all excused for traveling. So let's go ahead on, anything on the agenda to change? I think, okay, let's move on then. So to 2A, the marijuana application. And is there someone from that here, Mandy?
Oh, okay.
How about on the phone? I guess I'll ask. So there's no one here in the room on this marijuana application. If there's anyone on the phone, can you identify yourself?
This is Mark Hoff,
Okay.
Caribbean Dream.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay.
You got that? Okay, Mandy, you want to do your thing?
Yes. So this is a new marijuana license application for a cultivation facility. It's Caribbean Dreams LLC, doing business as Ganja Guys of Alaska. Upon review of the application packet for the license requirements, all of the general license restrictions were addressed in their operating plan. There were no taxes, fees, or fines found due. They addressed all of the safety and security standards in their operating plan as well, and the cultivation-specific license restrictions were addressed as well. We didn't receive any comments from other departments regarding license conditions, and so there's no additional conditions recommended for the license.
Thank you. And this is Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is Ryan Young with the Planning Department. This is a request for a special land use permit for a marijuana cultivation facility within an I-1 district. Petition site is located northeast of the intersection at East International Airport Road and A Street, and the proposed establishment will be located within an existing commercially designed structure. Approximately 1,500 square feet of available interior space will be dedicated to cultivation operations, and the operating hours are approximately 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. It is important to note there's a co-located marijuana retail sales establishment within the same building that's under the same business name and ownership, and because of this, the total licensed premises square footage will be 3,126 square feet. The closest protected land use is a habilitative care facility located approximately 1,333 feet away. It's measured via straight line from property line to property line. The site has obtained legal non-conforming rights for building encroachments present on the property and a lack of visual enhancement landscaping and parking lot maneuvering design standards. And after review of the application, we do believe that the approval criteria are met for the special land use permit, and that the use is consistent with the Anchorage 2040 land use plan. The provided site plans do not show any major alterations to the building facade or structure that make it of dissimilar character, scale, or size when compared to surrounding structures. And the planning department does recommend approval of the special land use permit subject to the conditions as stated in the staff report. And then just one quick note, the clerk's office compliance checklist was accidentally omitted from the packet, but will be submitted as an AIM on this item, so the assembly should have it. And then just for the committee's review this morning, I did print off a copy of it and provided it to you. But nothing further to add.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Pete, Chris? Chris, I'm watching my phone if you want to get in the queue on anything.
Yes, nothing for me, thanks.
Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I looked at this, and the thing that stuck out to me was the estimate of how much it was going to cost them to upgrade their electrical to, so they would have enough juice to do 1,500 square feet of cultivation, over $100,000. So that's a lot of electrical work. And, but this is located in an industrial zoned area, industrial businesses next to it. So I think they found a a reasonably good location.
Good, thanks. So I have a couple of questions. I think, Mr. Ha, you're on the phone, so you might answer a few of these as I go through them. And one thing I focus on over the years is the square footage, because if you increase or change it, you'd have to come at certain threshold to get approval and so on. And the staff report says 1,500 square feet. Your application on page 14 says licensed premises 3,126, which might be the whole building. And then the state application says 1,306 square feet under cultivation. And then you have your lease in there that says 1,500 square feet on the first floor. And I think this is on the second floor. Is that correct, Mr. Hoff?
That is correct. Some of the differences are that there's a little bit of a common area in the upstairs area in order to get access to the actual growing premises.
So is it, what's your cult, I mean, what would be the number? I guess this is to Ryan. What's the proper number there? We have like 3.
Mr. Chair, I think the proper number would probably be 1,500 square feet specific to the cultivation. The 3,126 square feet encompasses both the marijuana retail and the marijuana cultivation.
That is correct. I would agree with that.
So now what's the relevance of the lease? Because I think that's a state, right? Because we always get the lease.
Mr. Chair, that's correct, yeah. We do not require a copy of the lease as part of the municipal application, but the state does like to see that as part of their application process.
Okay. So that's their issue then. Okay, good, thank you. So, and then I just want to comment on the public meetings. So it said that there was, we had a couple, fairly recent. Some page 21, it called your meeting a community council meeting, and it wasn't really a community council meeting. It was your community meeting, and that's a little bit different. And then it says that on January 20th, you also had a community meeting, and it doesn't. I didn't see anywhere in the report where you went to the community council. So this is to Mr. Hall.
I've actually went to 3 different meetings. We had there was a community council meeting, and they had some, and it was in the middle of COVID. It was all done electronically, and they had some electronic technical difficulties that ended up cutting the meeting short, and they were going to reconvene and let me know, and I've been in communication with them several times, and they never did. The first community meeting that we called was done, but we didn't have adequate notice. So we did a second one where we did have adequate notice. Neither meetings brought any participants, though, from the community.
Okay, thanks. Okay, good, thank you. So, and then we have no comments from the community council at all, Mr. Young?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. No comments received from either the public or the community council.
Okay, and then, Mr. High, I think this is just, maybe it's irrelevant at this point, but on page 29, you say Ganja Guys is open to the public. Seems very generous. Page 31, next page, it says Ganja Guys will be closed to the public. Make a choice.
Well, the retail would be open to the public, and the cultivation would be closed to the public. So, yeah, that probably would need to be corrected.
Okay, and then on page 34, you mentioned under the section on mold management, you said Eagle Street plan will employ strict mold management system. Who is Eagle Street plant?
Oh, it's a friend who is doing a cultivation, and we are actually adopting their program, and I think we should have taken that out.
Okay. So that's not connected to what you're doing?
No, sir.
Okay, and then I guess to Ryan, so the parking, that's not a real, I mean, they have enough parking, or what's the issue there?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. The traffic department, previously when they came in with their marijuana retail special land use permit application, that traffic department did approve their parking plan. And this building alteration does not increase their parking demand. So parking is good to go.
Okay, that was my list of questions. Thank you, Mr. Ha. So often, and I think you saw this, Mr. Ha, when you did your retails, the committee would have an advisory vote for the rest of the assembly. We don't have a quorum today to do that. So, so your application is in front of the assembly on Tuesday.
All right, thank you.
And it'd probably be convenient if you were there. It's a long meeting with a full agenda. So I don't know if we'll get to you, but just a warning.
I was in the last one, and it was a very long one. I was, I think, the last one on the docket.
So you can sign in to get called when we get to it, so you don't have to.
I found that out later.
Okay, you might want to try that. So because I look at that agenda and see it overflowing to another meeting. So okay, any more on that? Thank you, everyone. So I've been here for every marijuana license for 6 years, which has been exciting. This will be my last one, so it's kind of. So I wanted to make sure I asked all my questions. my habit. So moving on, we have downtown plan update. Christine is here. Chris, do you represent downtown, or you're North Anchorage now?
Yeah, but it's downtown is definitely in my district, and yeah. So looking forward to hearing the proposals you have.
Okay, so I guess I'll kind of introduce. So I mean, this was in front of us when, a month ago? It was on the agenda.
March 15th.
And we had a public hearing. Is that correct?
I believe you continued the public
We
hearing.
continued it. Okay.
Presentation, or you decided no?
I don't think we need the presentation. But Pete, would you be interested in a presentation? I think it's one we saw at the work session.
I cut it down substantially,
Oh.
so I don't need to give it, but we can.
How quick is it?
We can.
Yeah, if you could fly through it, that would. It's supposed to be okay. You know, for my part on this, I mean, I had lots of comments. That's my nature on these things, but a lot of it, I think the key part in any plan is really the last few pages when you get into implementation. So I have just a few questions on that I want to go through.
All right.
But if you want to start with that, do that instead.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Christine Bunnell, Long Range Planning Manager, and I'm here with staff from Long Range, Daniel McKenna Foster and Tom Davis, who have both helped with the downtown plan. And then also with us today is Holly Spooth-Torres from Huddle, AK, and then Shanna Zussman from Agnew Beck. So we were able to do a work session with you. I forget what the date is now, but as always, with any time that we talk about the plan, we acknowledge that we are on Dena'ina land, and it is with gratefulness and respect the planning team wishes to acknowledge the traditional home of Dena'ina Askabathans and the contributions Alaska Native peoples make to our community and society today. We would especially acknowledge the traditional importance of the area considered for this downtown plan and for Ship Creek as the traditional first salmon ceremony site. Thank you. So real quickly, this is our team, and then on the right there, this has been our timeline. And we actually initiated the plan in 2020, and so there's a little bit of overlap there between 2020 and 2021, 2022. We'll talk a little bit about how things have changed with the economy. So I think you mentioned to me a couple of minutes ago, Mr. Weddleton, that we're in a recovery now, and when we were writing the plan, we were right in the middle of the pandemic, so things have changed a little bit. So go ahead, let's go on. Why are we doing this plan? AMC 2103 talks about a targeted plan review. This is for comprehensive plans, and the director at the time in 2020 initiated the targeted review of the plan, which is supposed to be done every 10 years. And then we're supposed to look at the economic and demographic conditions every 10 years. Has there been any rezonings, any recent or proposed land use decisions? Those are things like tax incentives, and then adopted studies and plans, and that's what we've done with this plan review. So high points, our population is down, but jobs are up. We're in a recovery. We did a housing capacity study for downtown. We did a housing target. We're working on a downtown code update right now from what we heard during the planning process. We're going to be bringing updates to the current tax incentives to the Assembly here soon. We're talking about creating a gap funding trust fund, which I believe Mr. Constant has already initiated that for us, hopefully with the state, and that was really good news that I saw in the newspaper yesterday, I believe. And then we talk about public-private partnerships within the downtown area, utility coordination. I left parking coordination off of here, but that's an important element. We're going to be moving forward with a downtown streets engineering study soon if we get the funding for that through the TIP. And then, of course, this plan is supports small businesses across the downtown area. So we heard comments during the Assembly public hearing on March 15. There was comments about parking. We're proposing a parking authority, which we already have a parking authority with ACDA. But currently, our private parking landholder, which is essentially, they essentially hold quite a few parking lots in downtown. We would encourage them, Diamond Parking, to work a little bit closer with ACDA, and that would be able to help us with bringing new housing and commercial into downtown on those open parking lots that are there right now, what we call buildable land. A redevelopment authority. ACDA is already tasked in code to be a redevelopment authority. They haven't been acting as that as much as we'd like to see them do that. So this plan acknowledges the ACDA and wants their ability to move forward and do more redevelopment if possible. Housing incentives. There are 3 housing tax incentives proposed from our gap funding working group. We already have 2 basically incentives on the books right now. That's the 4-unit 12-year tax incentive, which is set to expire in 2024. We're asking to renew that and make that municipal wide if you do 12 units or more, and then in downtown keep the 4-unit one and make that a 15-year housing incentive. And then we're proposing a 14-unit housing target for the next between now and 2030, and with that gap trust fund, that would help us get to that. Design guidelines were mentioned in the comment response table, and then also not specifically mentioned at the work session, but I believe we heard somebody mention Mr. Debenham's comments that were in the comment response table. He felt that the plan didn't need to have design guidelines, but plans with design guidelines help us guide what the code is going to say, and so we answered back to Mr. Debenham, we'll work on the code and what the design and what needs to be in there. And we need to meet solar access. We need to meet some of the wind issues and the views. And so, like I said, we're working on that right now with the downtown code update, doing a lot of research on that. The plan has strategies that it didn't have before. Strategy 1 is focus the effort. that comes out a lot in Chapter 3. Strategy 2, build great housing, and that comes out in Chapters 3 and 6. And then Strategy 3, get important input from women in the community. That's talked about a lot in Chapter 5, which is our quality of life chapter. Strategy 4, lead by example, and that we talk about that a lot in Chapter 4 with the new incentives and the Housing Trust Fund and the public-private partnerships. Strategy 5, make connections to surrounding neighborhoods. That large overview of that is in Chapter 7, which talks about safer pedestrian facilities, transit bicycle use, and trail projects, trail connections. And then Strategy 6, make downtown safer. That's more about Chapter 5, the quality of life, the things that Anchorage Downtown Partnership does, our police force that's downtown, and then I don't know if Anchorage Downtown Partnership still has the Clean Safe Vital, do they? Or they do? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's going on. And then the lighting upgrades that are occurring right now on 4th Avenue, and they'll be going over to 3rd Avenue, and as we're working on that. Why is the lighting being done on downtown? It's because we have the oldest infrastructure in downtown, so it needs to be fixed. And so that helps to make downtown safer. And then let's go to the next one. Here's our revitalization strategy. You see the blue kind of rectangle there. That's a focus area for redevelopment, and then the yellow kind of L shape, that is the Fairview East Downtown Tax Abatement Zone. That is set to expire too. That was adopted in Chapter 12.35. And so we'd like to see that extended, that date from the past 2024 to 2030. And then we have a few opportunity sites there. Some are state-owned, some are privately owned there in the downtown and East Fairview area. And then we have cultural districts that are identified in this one. And then let's go ahead. So the housing, like I said, we did a housing capacity study. It's estimated that we could have around 4,700 new housing units in downtown. That's across the board, all kinds of housing. And what the plan advocates for is 1,400 new market rate housing units in the next 5 to 8 years. That's workforce housing. That's housing that we need to fill the many, many jobs that we have right now. And again, we would need to have some tax incentives updated. The GAP Trust Fund would be helpful. And then having ACDA move into public-private partnerships to help out with that would be ideal situation for us. Housing is economic development. AEDC has been carrying that message since at least 2014, and so this plan carries that message too. And then here's the gaps and why we'll be asking for the incentives and why that GAP Trust Fund is important. And if anybody has any questions on this, then Shanna can help answer any questions about that. So then let's go ahead and move. Here's our buildable lot capacity study. So all the pink, the dark pink and the lighter pink is all the buildable lots that we looked at. And so what do we want to do next? We had a gap housing funding working group. We have a study done from that group, and we need to finalize that study and get that out to everyone. We're working on the downtown code update. We've had about 7 meetings. Yeah, we've had 7 meetings. We're getting ready to wrap that up, probably 2 more meetings, and then we'll be starting to work on the ordinance for the downtown code. Daniel's coming forward with the reinvestment focus area ordinance, and you'll be seeing that at the assembly here in the next month or so. We would like to designate the blue area in downtown as our first reinvestment focus area. And then we want to secure funding for utility upgrades in that reinvestment focus area and start the utility coordination process. And then again, I mean, Mr. Constant has helped out with the hopeful establishment of that housing trust fund. So those are the things that we're going to be working on after the plan is adopted. And then why is it so important to support downtown? Those very large red spikes are the taxes that downtown brings into the rest of Anchorage. Downtown property is the most valuable property in Anchorage. It's tax area, I believe, 1, and those properties pay the highest tax rate in the municipality. Downtown supports the entire Anchorage, including Eagle River and I believe Girdwood. So what do we need the administration to do and the assembly to do? 1,400 market rate housing units by 2029, 2030. Housing is economic development, and what works in downtown will eventually work for the rest of Anchorage, and that's referring to those tax incentives that bring more housing in. We can go ahead and leave this up, and then if anybody wants to refer back to it.
Good, thank you.
If I might, please.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks. Just one note on that tax levy. I know people often think that's not true, and if you look straight at the levy tables, the tax tables, it doesn't look like it's true. The highest tax area is downtown because there is one area in South Anchorage that has a higher mill rate, but if you add the levy for the downtown partnership that did, it does step up above all the other areas. And I know that's a voluntary assessment, but it is certainly something that those folks pay in taxes. But separately from that, also, the density of the taxpayers and the actual revenues in the downtown are substantially higher than any other part of town. So I just want to make sure that record's clear, because someone could go to the mill tables or the levy tables and see it's the second highest downtown, but once you add in that assessment for the improvement district, it's definitely high. So higher.
Thank you, Mr. Constant, for that point. I did not. The density is and then that DID downtown. I appreciate that.
Thank you for squashing the battle between Glen Alps and downtown.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So, good, thanks.
All right.
Chris, anything else? Pete?
Well, my question is, we have the incentives for a few years. Do we feel they're working? Are we getting development because of the incentives that we provided, or not?
So I'm going to let Shanna and talk about that a little bit. You want to go back to that gap table? Oops, there we go. So the incentives have been there. Elizabeth Place and Conchie Place came in before the incentives were there. Sean Debenham's Block 96 is coming in. He's using the 4-unit incentive. But Shanna can answer why we haven't seen a lot more. And it's referring to this table right here.
Yeah, so if you look at the first row, the current downtown project, we modeled 3 different examples in downtown, but the first one is kind of the density levels that we're trying to see, the 4 units and a half an acre. The gap without anything, without the existing tax incentive, was about $120,000 per unit. And then when we add in what has already been put on the table, it lowers that gap to about $70,000. So almost half of the way through the problem gets solved with what's already in place. And I think folks understood that when the 12-year tax incentive was approved, that it wasn't the full solution, but it was starting to move us in the right direction. And we've been working for many years, really, to try to identify sources of patient capital or other ways to invest in the projects that could bring the project to full feasibility. But those resources seem few and far between. But if you do look at ACK, the ACDA investment, essentially models that patient capital example. And so, but without other sources of patient capital that can really be used for multiple projects, the other option for the municipality is to extend the tax incentive to a longer term, to maybe 25 years, and then you can see how you can also address the gap in that way.
Thank you.
So, I mean, you look at the presentation and think, okay, that makes sense. It's really expensive, but just across the boundary, if you look at Bootlegger's Cove, there's been some private development there without incentives that I think is sold pretty quick. I mean, I have a friend who did one. I think it was 10, 11 units, and they're very expensive, but he sold them. He rents them. He just rents them. And then I think Holquist is doing something just outside of the incentive boundary, and they're going forward with that. I don't know how well it's done. Is that, so what's the difference between one side of that line and the other?
So a couple of things. So just the product type, the rental market doesn't perform as well as the for sale market just across the board. So you can really generate more value out of a for sale product, and I think these pro formas are all based on rental. If you were to do sort of say stacked flats condos in the downtown, you might not see the exact same gap, but the problem is that you have the limitations around financing condos where you have to pre-sell 50% of them, which makes it more challenging if you're going to build say 50 units at once and pre-sell 25 versus doing sort of clusters of for sale product at 4 or 6 units a piece. But the for sale product would probably have a slightly smaller gap in the downtown than the rental. But when you do move over into Bootlegger's Cove or any area that has a view, you can pop your rents up quite a bit more than what's shown there on the side. And even just a small increase in those rents, like if you got your studios up to say $1,500 a month, $1,600 a month, you could start to see more feasibility. But these rents are specifically targeted based on what we are seeing already in downtown. I mean, there is units in downtown. A lot of them are rented for lower than that. And just this idea of not luxury rents, but rents that are kind of affordable to the workforce, but again, not income restricted.
Okay.
And again, this table is based on market rate workforce rental housing. So folks like the Cuddies who built their really nice townhouses or whatever they're called, and then the rail where the railroad built that, those are both for sale properties, and so that we're not even beginning to refer to anything like that with this table. This is market rate rental housing that can bring workforce here, that stays here for a year or two, says, hey, I do really like Anchorage, I'm going to stay, and then those folks would eventually be moving into a townhouse or something like that they would be able to buy once we start building more townhouses and things like that too.
I think the Cuddies is rentals.
Oh, okay, but they're
really
they're
expensive.
very expensive, yeah.
Okay. So, in a question of the incentives, we get a lot of requests to do it citywide, right? We have this gap everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you do that, well, what does that do to downtown? I mean, this focuses on if we're doing this downtown, but if you want housing downtown and you spread the incentives across the city, you're going to have more building elsewhere. It seems like. Did you look at that?
I mean, I guess that work maybe goes back to the work we supported several years ago around the workforce housing and transit corridor tax incentive, which is citywide but restricted to particular areas. I mean, I think, again, if you're looking at only a 12 to 15 year tax incentive, you're not going to solve the full problem for the rental product. And so really combining that incentive with opportunity sites where you have a willing developer, someone who maybe bought the property many years ago as a low basis, you just really escalate your opportunity for more housing. And so, if we look over the last, 10, 20 years, we just haven't seen very many market rate housing projects. Really, the one off Raspberry was one of the last ones at a large scale. I think when you combine an incentive citywide with the land that's available and the developers are willing, you just create more opportunities for housing. And it's very unlikely that you're going to see, so many projects that's going to really impact the demand in a particular area. I mean, downtown, I think, is really the location that people want to be for this urban style product. But it's great if we can also do that in Midtown. And there are certain locations in South Anchorage that can really benefit from that as well.
Okay, so in summary, so if these incentives were spread citywide, you don't think that's a real big problem for downtown?
I do not.
You don't? Okay. Well, that's worth knowing because that's coming your way, I'm pretty sure. So be ready. So I have some questions. If Pete, did you, a couple, and I'll go through it, just kind of the implementation pages here with some comments, but, on what I think is built into the land use map is that fold out, right? Is that step 2, that's your land use map?
The land use plan map is on page 63.
63.
Uh-huh. And then that's the revitalization map right there that you have.
Oh, wait, here, sorry. This is one. Okay, so that's this one, right?
Yeah, the land use plan map is,
Yeah, land use is this draft, right?
yes.
Okay. So, and if you read the report and you talk about these areas, but typically a land use map would be, this is residential. It talks about what is done there. These are labeled kind of like your cultural title or something. So it doesn't say this is multifamily
If
it just
you
reads, it's presented very different than, our land use plan, or if you look at other plans that designate densities and so on, think of Hillside District Plan, okay, this will be 0 to 1 DUA, and this one is higher, and so on. But this doesn't come across that way.
right, because we're so what we found when we did the land capacity study, there was only one downtown zoning district that had a dwelling unit per acre. When they looked at that versus what it says in the code, they bumped up against each other. And so we feel that it's better to not designate dwelling units per acre in the land use plan map and have the code carry that. So it's easier for people, they're going to go to essentially they'll go to the code to figure out what they want to develop. We don't want them to have to be searching around different places to figure that out.
They should be used to that by now, because that's how we do it, right? I mean, you start it. I don't know if that's a crisis. I just look at this and it's not what I see in other plans.
We had a lot of feedback from developers and then from designers and things like that said it's easier for us if you keep it in the code.
So if someone wants to rezone, now we have to change we may have to change the land use plan sometimes to match this rezone and also do the rezone. But you would never have to do that here then, because you don't specify densities or zoning or anything in your land use map.
Well, we talk about the zoning, what can be in here, the B2A, the B2B, the B2C, what can be in the different land use designations. If you go to page 64. So we talk about those.
Okay, so if I'm in, and I looked at this because R4 is essentially mixed-use residential. Is that a good way to summarize R4?
Right, but R4 wouldn't be in downtown.
We have it in the downtown mixed use.
That's on that very edge of. That's actually in the West Fairview area.
Okay, so it doesn't apply to downtown because it's not one of these Bs.
Right.
It's another.
But I'm glad you're bringing that up, because if that's a little bit confusing, then maybe that's something that we need to talk about.
Well, I did, because I think R4 is very much what you want all through downtown. So I was surprised not to see it everywhere, but that's because it's not.
Right.
Okay. All right. Yeah, maybe I'm the only one who was just we have some of the heights are limited by seismic, which I suppose you run into if you do a development project pretty quickly, right? But did you look at requiring people to build to the maximum, to the minimum density, like you have in the various things here? You might have 4 stories or 9 stories as the by right. Did you look at requiring people to build to the by right 9 stories if it go to 9 stories?
When they did the capacity study, yes.
You assumed that they were building to 9 stories?
Yeah. Depending on the district.
So what do you see in that? So if someone comes in and buys a property and says, I want to build a 2-story here, but it can go to 9, what do you do?
I don't know, we haven't talked about that, have we?
Well, I think what Mary Lisa did is she went through and some of the planners who deal with this every day could jump into, but my assessment of what they were talking about was when you use the bonus point table, the things that you would need to do in order to get the height would actually restrict the size of where you could develop. So you were kind of like working against yourself as the building got taller.
So you would have like less rentable space if you went taller?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so even though it says, and I forget which zone it was, it's, I guess R, but B2A is 9 stories. So you said, if you want to build downtown, we want to maximize use of the land, make it 9 stories. And you're saying that might not really get you the units. So can you fix that? Is that part of the plan?
So what we're doing with the code is we're discussing the heights in each of the zoning districts and by right how tall you can build.
So you may change that when you're saying.
If there's a reference in here that references that, then we will change it, yes.
Okay.
So, sorry to interrupt, but what the plan does is it makes a recommendation to do that work, and then they're starting to do that work with the code update.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess moving the question a little bit different then, did you look at requiring anyone building downtown to build to the maximum number of square footage or something? You know, maybe it's your...
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I think what you're asking is, so yes, but the parking required, structure, so it moves, so building to the most amount of density would require moving to steel, like requiring elevators, requiring significant amount of parking, so nothing would ever pencil. So basically we have a code that places requirements that nobody's going to use because it can't make it pencil from a business perspective.
There's no parking requirement downtown.
There's no parking requirement.
Right, but you're just saying realistically they need some.
Yeah.
So the realistic, okay, that makes sense. I know when we rewrote our thing decades ago, the code, the new code, a decade ago, there was discussion of, you know, whatever area you were in, you have to build to the maximum density in that area, and that got squashed. People didn't like that, but you know, if you really are looking for more units, it seems like, yeah, you can't build a 2-story if you could build 4 or whatever maximum units, whatever would lead to it.
So what we're trying to help development do with the guidance in the plan, and then what we're working on with the code is, we already talked about this. We talked about this earlier. The front and back setbacks have been taken out of the downtown code, so those setbacks have gone away. The team that we're working with on the code update is going to recommend that the side setbacks go away too. The tax incentives and the ability to build as tall as they need to build, and then the parking coordination process where you know, ACDA might have parking that they could use so they don't have to build as much parking on site or something like that. That's going to be able to incentivize development there too. So it's a whole toolbox that we're putting together with the plan and then the code and then these coordination processes, including the parking and including the utility coordination process and the tax incentives if they're going to be building market rate rental housing to help bring new development downtown. So it's not just one thing that's going to get us to what we're advocating with the plan. It's going to be a a toolbox, which I know gets overused time and time again, but it's going to be a bunch of different tools that people will be able to use.
Good, well, I hope so. So if we could move to the implementation.
Sure, yeah.
I just had a few questions. So, and this is laid out well. So looking at page 116, your LU6,
Mm-hmm.
and it says seek a percentage of alcohol tax proceeds to reinvest in a proposed tax zone area. I don't think that's anywhere near what alcohol tax could be used for,
Okay.
because that's very restricted.
Okay.
Be careful on seeing that. Did
All
you
right.
look at that, or just hopeful?
That was hopeful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't think that'll apply. You can check with Dean. Then on page 117, you refer to the idle property tax abatement program, and I don't see that defined anywhere.
We don't have that yet, and again, that's another aspirational situation where we've got some downtown property owners that basically have parking lots, and way back when in 2016, when Smart Growth America came to town, Ethan specifically asked Smart Growth America, what do we do to encourage parking lot owners to build? And in other areas, that tax incentive has happened. And so it's mentioned in here as, again, another tool, but we don't know when or if that would ever go forward. So it's just in there.
Well, I got, but you say the word, but nowhere say this is X. I mean, even 4 or 5 sentences say. I mean, I have to Google it to know what that
Oh,
word is.
okay. So I could better explain it if
Yeah.
you
Because
think
even
that
going back
works.
in that chapter, it's mentioned, but it doesn't say what it is.
Okay.
So you go, oh, that sounds cool. What is it? So. And then 117, your LU 13, and at the end it says works with LU 11, and I don't see the connection there. Do you mean works with LU 12?
Let's see. Yes, it could work with LU 12. It could also work with LU 11.
Well, what's in 11 that connects? Seismic.
So in the seismic zones, there's certain things that we don't want built there, like schools and different things like that. It would probably be better to just change that to LU 12.
Okay, then on the next page, 118, so the quality of life QOL 5 and 6, so both of these mention like one, direct pedestrian bicyclists in the case of an emergency, and then where to shelter in place. Is that, so I guess in number 5, what does that mean? So like if there's an earthquake or a tornado?
Right.
Go
So
ahead, sorry.
there's nothing in downtown. There's no wayfinding. There's no emergency notification system in the downtown area for visitors or people that are in downtown to tell them where to go in case an earthquake happens.
So big things.
And
down
so
there.
this would be part of the wayfinding program, and we've talked a little bit with the EOC about this. I mean, right now, and it's funny that you brought this up because I was thinking about it last night. If there was a big earthquake right now and you were home and your house started cracking apart, would you know where to go to shelter?
Go to my store in Spinard because it's rock solid.
Okay, but you live, where do you live?
Bottom of the hillside.
All right, so you're going to have to drive all the way there. If your school, the closest school to you, was designated as a place to go, would you go there? I mean, people don't know that they need to go to the local school, or they don't know that they need to go to the local church. Same situation with downtown. This would help people know what to do.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was like if there's a mugging or something like that, quick, go there. But you're talking big natural disasters. Okay. I would caution on page 121 that B and C, or whatever, that, you know, if you tell people carpool and you take a bus to downtown, you're saying there's no parking. That's the biggest thing I hear about downtown. Oh, no, but I can't park.
Okay.
I always find plenty of parking, but if you are insistent that you have to park right in front of where you're going, right, which many people do, then there's no parking. But I think that's what the message would be. Don't go downtown, there's no parking. If you say carpool or
Okay.
take a van, just a warning.
So the reason why this one was put in is we're in the process right now of starting a transportation demand management program for the UMed and a study, and there may be things coming out of that encourage carpooling and that kind of thing. And what I was trying to do with that was whatever we learn for the UMed, we could potentially use for the downtown area for commuters, is what it is. Yeah. So I mean, it says program for commuters, but I get what you're saying.
I guess that was the main thing. So I had, and as I told Christine, just kind of going through some minor edits and then some other kind of questions. But as you go through, I mean, there's some things like Christina mentioned that are, talks about, do this for, allow them to have restaurants and drinking out on the streets, which is, I think, done all over the country. It's a good thing. We should do whatever we can to encourage that. But it found the foundation of that comment is because of the recovery. We're past that recovery business, so that's archaic language, and I think should be pulled out. I mean, it's easy enough to do, and so there's that kind of thing in here.
Mm-hmm.
So when this goes to the assembly Tuesday, and it gets approved a week later because the meeting will be extended.
Don't tell me that.
Just a warning. So what? I just want to make sure that you have the ability with that to do. I think we talked about technical amendments.
Edits.
Edits. This is it, and that's the way it goes forward. Okay, which I don't think you want because it doesn't. I mean, you could read it and see, we need to update these things, right? I'm looking at Holly.
Yeah.
So, how much are you allowed to do?
Yeah, I think the last time the assembly approved a plan for us, the motion was to approve the plan, and then if there were other, like a couple of different amendments in there or something like that an assembly member wanted to bring forward. But then the motion also included and complete the various technical edits that need to be done to, bring the plan to, the present day or whatever. Again, like this, we were in a tough situation. We started this plan literally in the middle of the pandemic, and there was just so much going on right then. And I've been reading through it to see what needs to be edited, and there's some language that can change because we're, like you said, starting to recover now, and tourism is back and that kind of thing. So Dave left. Anyway, Dave and I talked about it. Yeah, and he said, so the motion can be made in that way.
I think you'd want maybe an amendment to the AO or something. Dean's working on another project.
I was just thinking, listening to this, that would be good word or statement we should have in this section in the ordinance. Whenever you present an area plan around the technical amendments you authorized, if you would give that in your ordinance in the first presented. And I guess when you say technical amendments, you mean things like correcting grammar?
Well, I
discrepancies,
think
sections,
technical edits is
consistency between
better.
documents?
Yeah, technical edits is better.
The code revisor has done that authority to
Mhm.
do things like that for Ordinance or something as by ordinance. So if it's the same thing, then that's all it's sort of like
Okay.
It's a little more extensive than the typical small code amendment thing, though. So is that something, so would you write
So
something
an
up
amendment
like-
is something that needs to be public and go to the public and, have that whole discussion, that public time frame. But if we're doing technical edits based on the fact that the plan was started right when the middle of a pandemic, but things have changed, it's okay to do those few edits to make that be
Right.
more timely.
When I say amendment, I don't mean to the plan, I mean to the AO, because that's what we'd be voting on.
Oh, okay.
So it seems like an amendment somewhere in there under the.
But I would interpret that as if we're going to start changing words, it wouldn't have any sort of policy impact, right? It
Yeah,
would just
exactly.
Yeah.
have like tone and edits, technical edits, I guess.
Right, so you just, I think, under Assembly Ordains, have a new section and say, technical edits are expected for X number of reasons, updated to current relevance, or longer-term relevance, I think, without changing any policy implications. And I think looking at, really with these plans, where do you go? You go to implementation steps is really the bulk of it, and all that other lovely text you did, sorry, people don't read, right? And that is not, the way that's written, there's not that much in there that would change, I don't think, of anything, some minor things, but.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as practicality, is your budget used up?
No, I'm the one that's doing the edits.
You're doing all
Christine
that?
does
Yeah.
most of it, yeah.
Okay.
She's been very good at managing the budget.
Okay.
Okay, if I may, I have the ordinance, I think, on page 3, you have section 3, this effective date. My suggestion would be a new section 3 that authorizes the technical amendments that we're talking about, and crafting that language carefully, but also because you want to be transparent and clear as to what's been done, how is the public supposed to know, or the assembly, that we that section also ask planning to submit an AIM describing what was done, what the changes were according to that technical amendments authorized section. And that I think would be most hopeful for everybody.
Okay. So will you move to amend the AO, or do you want me to?
We have a floor amendment, amendment 1 from Mr. Constant for the plan already. So we need a floor amendment document too.
Okay.
And we can prepare it for the meeting.
Okay, perfect.
Email, we get that ready, and I guess perhaps Mr. Weatherly wants to sponsor it.
Okay, sounds
I
good.
won't be there. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
it was doubtful,
Yeah.
it's hard to say, it's unclear on how long I remain.
Okay.
But I don't think we should count me.
Okay,
But
so-
I don't think, I think this is Chris could do it, right, Chris?
Sure.
All right.
It's pretty simple and straightforward.
All right. Yeah. No, I'm not changing any of the goals and policies. It's just basically the story, because things have changed, and I would rather have the plan sound a little bit more like it's got a brighter future. Like right now it sounds like it's, wow, we're really in the doldrums, but we're actually coming out of the doldrums, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, and some of it, I think you do say it in here, it's kind of a mixed thing, as people look and they look at all the, parking lots, and they go, what a tragedy. And I go, what an opportunity.
Yeah.
It is stated as an opportunity in here, because, it's not where you want to be, but it's like, that's a wide open door for us to do things downtown.
Mhm.
And I don't want to see them covered in one-story buildings. That would be a long-term
Yeah, neither do
goof,
we.
But, as people look at other cities to develop in, I know there are builders here who see climate refugees as our future, people getting away from the constant wildfires and heat in lower 48 coming up here. mean, our future's bright.
Yes,
Sadly,
very
because of
bright.
global warming, I guess, but, and we have a downtown that's ripe for development.
Mhm.
So that's all I have. Sorry to talk so
All
much
right,
time.
thank you, John, we appreciate it.
Is there any more on that? So the last item is probably equally complex, and that is this 2022-36 height limits in R2A, R2D, and R2M. Is that someone here? Is that Tom?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We don't have a presentation. We're here available for questions. This amendment is to reform the 2 1/2 story height limit in the R2 residential zoning districts in order to allow 3-story buildings in locations that where 3-story buildings could provide more housing opportunity and that minimize impacts, shading, bulk impacts, character impacts to our existing R2 neighborhoods, which cover almost a third of the urban residential zones in the bowl. And this was a public process that began several years ago. And we've worked with the neighborhood community councils, several rounds of public process, and the public hearing draft was released after more consultations with the stakeholders, the home builders, in September for 2 months of review, and then a public hearing was held in December, and the Planning and Zoning Commission worked out comments from 2 community councils, and we forwarded their recommendations to the Assembly. And I think it was the same Assembly meeting as the downtown plan that we came forward, and so we're here to answer any questions that you have.
Chris, do you have anything?
No.
Pete? So Chris, this, it's, as this has gone on, and I think it's been a slow burn. I know Tom's been to I think even Hillside Community Council's on this probably, and it doesn't apply. But I mean, it's been fairly high profile change. But I think South Addition and maybe Fairview have some, seems like most of the feedback's from those areas. I mean, Chris, what's your sense?
Yeah, my personal sense is that about 2% of the municipalities R2 exists in South Addition and the area that is the kind of historic district that I've served. 2%, a very small amount. And these changes are wise. Tom has done an incredible amount of outreach to the community, and I can't say that they're all behind it, but these are common sense changes to help fix this housing problem we've been facing. And again, while they've been the loudest, they're certainly one of the smallest areas of the R2 zones in the whole city.
So what is South Addition zone? I guess that's to Tom.
About half. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
About half of South Addition is zoned in one R2 zone or another. Majority of that being R2M and a bit of R2A, R2D in the west end. And so they do, like Assembly Member Constant said, they do represent a relatively minor percentage of the R2 zoning in the Anchorage Bowl.
And they were heard. The process has been going on for 3 years now, and the inputs that they gave influenced the outcome of this code proposal substantially along the way. I mean, Tom, they're very familiar with you, and so with that in mind, I don't see a substantial amount of opposition at this time.
Well, that's good. Okay, I just, and we got some emails that hasn't been a deluge, but sometimes they get worn out too. So is this, I mean, with a goal of preserving kind of the texture of that neighborhood, you know, we see along the, I guess along 10th, kind of those vertical packs, I guess usually 4 condos, you know, 3-story typically, going up. So it's almost like this is designed to make those easier to build. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, you flipped out. I missed that last part.
Yeah, are these, and I guess I'm looking mostly at Tom, but you're welcome, of course, Chris. But it seems like these code changes are made to make it easier to build those kind of structures where you have like kind of a row of 3-story condos side by side that may have an elevator or something, whatever. Is that what kind of pushes this forward?
Yes, and it includes provisions to mitigate or minimize the impacts where those buildings reach 3 stories, so impacts being on the neighboring lots. The means by which a developer can request a 3-story building on a South Addition size lot is essentially through an administrative site plan review process. And so that is included in this ordinance, and it includes a number of additional approval criteria that are in addition to the general mitigating standards for any 3-story building allowed on larger lots elsewhere in the bowl. So it's built up with a number of safeguards and standards. South Addition also included comments during the process regarding the character of development. Both South Addition and Fairview are very concerned about wide driveways in front where the developer could have accessed the driveway through the alley in the back. Those kinds of design protections for the urban, if you will, pedestrian-friendly environment of those traditional urban neighborhoods. We indicated to those neighborhoods that safeguards for the traditional neighborhoods in terms of the design, we'd be looking at those as part of a separate amendment, a parking and site access driveways amendment to Title 21, which we are doing, and in fact South Addition, Fairview have provided comments on that. That's a separate ordinance, and that is recognizing the character of those neighborhoods and providing some of those protections. The R2 bulk height amendments focused on the bulk height.
Okay. I guess I don't have any more questions on this. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as I recall, some of the comments that we received were about shadowing and views. Someone has been living in a certain area for a long time, and all of a sudden a 3-story building goes up, and they lose their view, and that was the reason they moved there in the first place. It could be, it can be a negative for the situation. But we just have got such a need for housing that if we have to add an extra story on a building to try to get to the numbers we need, I just think it's something that has to be done, whether it's good for traditional neighborhoods or not. And I know they don't want to hear that, but that's the situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, it seems like those kind of 3-story things are real common on 48. My sister lives in one now, and they're all over Raleigh. They're building those like crazy, tearing down old buildings and old homes and plopping 3 on there. It changes the neighborhood, but we need housing. That's what people want more than the old style.
And yes, in response to that, we also worked with the neighborhoods, including Airport Heights, South Addition, and have built in mitigating height bulk provision so that a 3-story building's impact on the shadowing is really no more so than, in terms of its height, than the 2.5-story buildings already allowed today. Some of the higher 2.5-story buildings allowed today actually can have an equal or greater shadowing impact on a lot to the north. Just retested that with some visuals and tools to reconfirm that. So.
Well, and it depends on where on the lot you actually site the building. You can mitigate some of the shadowing and the view situation if you put the building in the exactly right spot.
Yes, that's what we found.
Okay, any more on this? Chris?
I just am very supportive of us getting this nailed down and done because it's literally been almost as long as I've been on the assembly. This question has been before us.
Yeah, it seems like it. What I've seen is great patience in working this through, and appreciate that.
Absolutely the same. It's like really, you hear the wheels of government turn slow, but this is one of those examples where there's a lot happened over time. Lots of good input and lots of good feedback and process and updates and everything. So really good work to everybody.
All right, so I don't see anything else. Audience participation, do we have any audience? None in the room here. Anyone on the phone? They do star 6.
I don't have anybody muted. There's Gina Ashman is the interpreter, and then there's just the clerk's
Okay.
office.
No audience participation. Move to adjourn.
Well,
Oh, Pete has something to say.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just wanted to state that it's been an absolute pleasure serving on this committee with you as chair over the last 6 years, and I'm not sure who the new chair of this committee is going to be, but they got big shoes to fill, and I think you've done an excellent job with this committee. We meet twice as often usually as the other committees, and sometimes the agendas get pretty full, so we've actually done a lot of work over the last half a dozen years, and I appreciate the hard work that you've done as chair of this committee.
No, thanks. No, I've enjoyed it. It's been a nice part of the time on the assembly is all this stuff here, and I think in particular kind of building the marijuana industry up, writing the code for that and watching how that's grown. And we've got a big omnibus marijuana bill we've been working on for 2 years. Come forward eventually. But it has been good, and working with the staff, it's been incredible. Of course, I've known many of you before I got on the assembly, Tom and others, and Dave and Craig. But it's been really tremendous. I really enjoyed it. And I feel bad I don't know the new planners because of COVID. I haven't really been in the offices to meet the new people so much. But it's been really good. Well, thank you. Anything else? I think we're done. Thanks, everyone.